I was crazy as a kid. I had 33 things that I read 3 times a day. I did it every single day. These 33 things were things of my future that I wanted. And I would cross them off. My friends would laugh at me. I'd read them in the backseat of the car out loud. I didn't care. That was where I wanted my mind. I had no idea how my subconscious mind was going to get me there. That was just me. And as I crossed them off my list, I started believing more that I was the creator of my life. And then unknown and unusual opportunities started to show up to cause me to believe that this is actually working.
Let's go.
He is a modern-day mystic. He is a world-renowned lecturer. He's an international best-selling author. He's a yogi. And he is somebody who I admire tremendously and to whom I'm incredibly grateful that he made the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Hi.
Hi. And I want to welcome our live studio audience here in Marco Island, Florida. And all of you at home who are watching this or listening to this, welcome. The show is called This Magic Life because I want our audience here in Marco, I want our viewers and listeners to get to hear firsthand from incredibly successful, gifted people like Dr. Joe, that our lives are not planned out. We may start out when we're in college trying to plan it, and then shit happens. It always does, because none of us has a crystal ball. Even Dr. Joe didn't have one.
Those synchronicities that you're talking about is just that you're not in the known anymore. That's when you trust your future. That's when you're out of the known, and it's aligning with the direction that you're going. So in looking back at everything that happened in my life, in me just being passionate about what I thought was great, led me to a really cool place. And I remember my father arguing with me, and it was really just came down to money and prestige and doing the right thing. And I just told him I wasn't worried about that and that I'd be fine. And I was sitting in my backyard of my house during COVID. And it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And Dr. Hemmel and Dr. Toby and Dr. Carla and Juan, all of us I was busy. We were all writing a grant for the NIH on the same day. And we were jamming to get this grant written and done. And I just remember pausing for a moment, sitting out there by myself and thinking, when in my life did I think I'd be writing a grant to the NIH about the blood-borne induced chemicals that are created in advanced meditators that can act as an adjunct therapy for the treatment of COVID-19. Like, when in my life, it just led me, it didn't matter like how I got there. When I was in my last year in graduate school, I had a month off, and I grabbed one of my buddies and I said, let's go to Arizona, let's go to California, let's go everywhere. So they had these gatherings. It was kind of like Burning Man back in the day. It was called the Rainbow Gathering. And him and I went all the way up to the Northern California, a bunch of hippies, 40,000 people on the side of a mountain. It was my groove then. I was like, all right, whatever. And I wound up working in the MASH unit like 10 hours a day because there's 40,000 people and people were overdosing, they were dislocating limbs, they were cutting themselves, injuring themselves, breaking bones, getting hurt. So it was kind of a fun thing. And so we started in Northern California. We came all the way down the coast and all the way to San Diego. And when I got to San Diego, I looked around and I said to my buddy, this is where I'm going to live. Just every hair on my body stood up. And I said to him, we were driving through Pacific Beach, and I said to him, pull over. He said, why? I said, just pull over. We pulled into a 7-Eleven. I'll never forget it. I got out of the car and I looked around and I saw across the street a sign that said chiropractor. I walked right across the street, walked into that guy's office, and that guy went to I knew nothing about him or anything. He went to the same school that I did. He knew a lot of the people that I knew. And I sat down with him and I said to him, if you hire me, I'll double your volume in 3 months. I'll double your volume, your clinic volume in 3 months. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, I'll do that for you. And he said, my wife's having a baby tonight. Listen, I can't invite you over, but go hang out with my staff tonight. And so I moved to San Diego, and I went to Scottsdale after that, and it just didn't have the pizzazz. I mean, I did a whole business prospectus, and San Diego was my place. It was my groove. So I moved there just shortly afterwards, and did that's exactly what I did. I doubled this practice in 3 months.
This is another example of fairy dust magic, and it's Dr. Joe listening to his intuition, trusting himself, trusting his gut. And that's what everyone needs to do, is to listen to themselves, because you know yourself better than anybody else. When you were in San Diego, you were doing triathlons. And this is when you had, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps what was the most traumatic experience of your young life was your bike accident.
Yes, so living in San Diego at the time was the hotbed for triathletes and for athletes. And so I wanted to have a very sports-oriented clinic, and we had a really young practice. We treated people between the ages of 18 and 45, and they were all health conscious. And we sponsored a lot of the 10Ks in San Diego. In fact, we created a couple of them that still exist today. And I was running the yoga studio at the time, and in the 80s, yoga, people would say you can get possessed from doing yoga. I mean, it was, the belief about it was very, very superstitious. We had a martial arts studio at the time. I had gotten my black belt when I was in undergrad in chiropractic college, and then the instructor that I got my black belt from mysteriously moved to San Diego, and we opened a school. And he was a great martial artist. We had a great school. We had a huge school, and I started doing 10Ks, 10K races. And in San Diego, you have the San Diego Fire Department, and you have the Navy SEALs. And somehow I got hooked up with both of these groups. And I was very fit. I was very athletic. I was a pretty good runner. And I created a 10K race team, and I wasn't even an alternate after the second month, because these guys were so fast. They were the San Diego Fire Department, all they did is work out, run, eat, work out, get out in the sun, ride their bikes, and the fire came, they'd get busy. But they became my friends, and I had a race team we won every race. The Coronado 10K, we won everything. The La Jolla Half Marathon, we won all of those races. And I couldn't even run because I wasn't good enough. And I thought I was pretty fit. So then I started getting into triathlons. And so I got pretty serious about cycling, really serious about cycling. And San Diego is a great place to cycle. And I would run 10K every day. I'd cycle in the evenings after I saw patients. I'd swim a mile before I went to the clinic. I was crazy, and so I had this deal with these two other guys that we were going to do this race, and the winner would get taken by the two losers anywhere along the West Coast, all expenses paid. I'm like, I'm in. And so I was training, not with these guys. I was training with my training partner. And then the night of the race in Palm Springs, I was just finished seeing my last patient. We're all getting ready to go. They call me up and they say, we're not going to do it. And I think, what do you mean you're not going to do it? And they say, we're not ready. I mean, what do you mean you're not ready? This is the race we're going to do. No, we're going to do the next one. And I remember just hanging up the phone and thinking, what am I going to do? And I was just going to go home. And then I thought, wait a second. I'm going to go. I'm going to go. So I want to call up my training partner, and we're going to go to Palm Springs from San Diego. So I remember I wasn't going to go, and I went. And one of my staff had a beautiful home in Palm Springs, and she hosted us there. I remember I ate at least a pound of pasta. Remember that.
That's good before a big race.
Yeah, I was carbing up. I was ready to go. And we got up in the morning and went down to the race, and they expected 500 people at this race in Indio. And they had over 1,000 entries, and so it was overcrowded. So they had to divide the group up into 2 categories. And the moment I got there, it was so disorganized, it felt really wrong. Like everything felt wrong. And I was standing with my hands behind my head. I was kind of loosening up. And my office manager, who had a house in Palm Springs, she was taking my bike over to the staging area. And this woman, I remember she was writing 282 on my leg. You know, they put it there and they put it here so you can see your number. And I say to her, while she's writing it on my leg, I say, so when is it my time to go? What time are they starting the race? She said, oh, you got about 20 minutes. And the moment she said that, they shot the gun off. And I thought, is that me? She said, yeah, I guess it's now, is what she said. And so I strip down, I hand everything to my office manager, and I have to run around the lake. I had to sprint around the lake, and everybody's in the lake, you know, they're already going. They shot the gun off early. And so probably swimming was my weakest of the 3 legs of a triathlon. And I thought, well, I got to pull out all the stops here and just go crazy. Now, if you're at the back of a triathlon and you're getting in the water and you're trying to catch up, it's guaranteed you're going to get kicked. It's guaranteed you're going to get hit. I mean, it's just you're swimming through people and it's crazy. So I had tried to swim around the group, and I got out of the water, and I probably was the most pumped I had ever felt in my life. I just was like swollen from going as hard as I could. And I got on the bike, and I thought, you know, the bike is like my strongest thing. I trained up and down those hills in Torrey Pines over and over again. I thought I'm going to make up some time here. So I got on the bike, and I got probably 10 miles into the race, and there was a police officer on the corner, and he was pointing at me like this. And what he was telling me to do is, I was coming down this road, he was telling me to make the turn. So he was pointing at me, and he was going like this. And the problem was he had his back to the oncoming traffic, and there were 2 cyclists on the corner, and so I kind of swung out to pass them. He gave me the green light. I scrubbed the brakes for a second, and then I started to just pick up speed. And when I picked up speed, this 4-wheel drive Bronco just came flying down the road going 55 miles an hour and just catapulted me out of my bike. I didn't even know. I just saw the bumper, and the next thing you know, I flipped up in the air, and when I landed on my back. So I landed kind of flat on my back, and it was a 83-year-old woman who was driving this Bronco, and she didn't know that she hit me, or her reflexes were a little bit slow. So the next thing I know, I'm face to face with the bumper. So I just kind of grabbed the bumper. She drags me down the road a little bit, and then she steps on the brake, and then I kind of roll maybe 30 yards like down the pavement. I just remember all the cyclists freaking out. They were screaming and yelling at her, and it was just kind of a crazy moment. And I landed, I kind of rolled on my back, and I could feel the blood kind of pooling in the back of my lungs there. I could feel like, oh, this is not a sprained strain. This is something else. And when you land that hard on your back like that, and there's an extensive or compressive force, or you land on an angle, that compressive force breaks the vertebrae. They takes the columns of it and compresses them down. So I had 6 of them that had compressed and broke. And the very top one, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12, T8, when I landed like this, and the vertebrae kind of compressed like a wedge in the front, and it pushed all the bone fragments back on my spinal cord, and on some of the other vertebrae had spinal compression, produced some fragments on the vertebrae cord area below that. And the neural arch of that 8th thoracic, when it compressed, broke like a pretzel. So I had multiple compression fractures of my thoracic spine. I had bone fragments on my cord, and I had cord compression from the neural arch breaking. So anyway, they took me to the hospital, and I was kind of a Puritan at the time, and I wouldn't take the drugs. My body was convulsing all over the place. And I just remembered I was wearing my favorite biking shorts, and they had to cut them off. And I was like, I'll lose my favorite lucky shorts.
Not so lucky at that
that time. And the problem was, because I was convulsing, when you do imaging like an MRI, you got to be still. And I just remember the technicians yelling at me, like telling me to stop moving, and I couldn't. I was there for 6, 7, 8 hours. I don't know how long, because I couldn't get my body to stop doing all kinds of these motor jerks and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I pass out. I get back to my room. I pass out. When I wake up, the whole entire side of my body is stuck to the sheets on the bed, because I had all this gravel on my legs and all this raw tissue. And when I fell asleep, all of it stuck to the sheets, And so they had to come with a squirt bottle, and they had to wet the whole thing and then slowly peel everything off, the one side of my body. Anyway, doctor comes in, he shows me the x-rays. I know exactly what he's going to say. He's going to say I need Harrington rod surgery. And that's where they cut off the back parts of your vertebrae. And they screw these stainless steel screws into your spine, and they put these rods over, and the rods act as a cantilever to pull the spine back up into extension and take the pressure off the cord. And so in my case, they wanted to cut from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. They had a complete laminectomy of all those segments, like 12-inch, 14-inch long rods, and they would contour it in my spine. Now, I mean, I was a 24-year-old kid. I was living the life. I had a great practice. I lived in San Diego. I lived a couple blocks from the beach. I had all the sports cars I wanted. I was successful. My life just changed dramatically, really, really dramatically. And so I got another opinion. And the guy said, Harrington rod. And I said, what if I don't have it? He said, listen, I've heard about a couple cases in Europe, but nobody does this. Get the surgery. Then they put me in an ambulance from Palm Springs, and they shipped me to Scripps Hospital in San Diego, and I met the guy. This is the guy who is the medical director of Scripps Hospital. He's got the salt and pepper hair. He's got the red power tie. He's got the lab coat. He's the man. And he just comes in, he says, we're going to start surgery on you tomorrow. He gives me the whole spiel, and then he says it. And I say, wait, I don't know if I want to do this. And he thought I had a head injury. Like, he couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to do it. I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, because my spine was like, I could, I was super flexible and super strong and fit. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life in pain or on addictive medications, and then they told me I was going to probably be paralyzed to some degree, and I probably have sensory and motor function problems, and you're going to you need the surgery. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do the surgery, I'm going to wind up partially paralyzed. Why do I really want to get it? So then I got a fourth opinion, and I just remember this guy walking in. He was probably 285 pounds, super kind of big guy, and I just remember him telling me that we can put 10-inch stainless steel rods in your spine and take them out and a year later, put 6-inch or 4-inch. And I just thought, oh my God, do I really want this? And I said to him, do you think that it could limit motion in my thoracic spine? And he looked at me and he said, you don't have any motion in your thoracic spine. And I looked at him and I thought, maybe you don't have any motion in your thoracic spine. Well, my roommate, who I did yoga with for years, flew into town, and he was with me the whole entire time. And he did a back bend and grabbed his ankles right behind him. I'll never forget that, because we could do any of that stuff. And I just thought, this guy he's a carpenter. He fixes broken things. And And I started thinking the power that made the body heals the body, the power that made the body heals the body. And I just started going off. And the leading surgeon got really mad at me, and he started yelling at my father. My father just looked at him and said, quiet, let him make the decision. Like my father just wanted me to make the decision for myself. Now, I think the hardest moment in our lives is when we weigh what we know against what we don't know. I had seen people heal from all kinds of things in hypnosis. I understood through my own experience in chiropractic, amazing things happen when you free the nervous system from nerve interference, when you get people back into physical, chemical, and emotional balance, how they can restore. I've seen enough. I read about all the yogis, I saw all this stuff. I was really into transcendence. I believed that, but I didn't believe at that time that I could influence that innate intelligence to take it to the next level. Take it to the point where I could get my body back into perfect health again. I didn't believe that. I thought the body could heal itself, but it's going to lay down calcium and it's going to lay down protein, and I'm going to probably have some broken bones and it's going to look that way. But that wasn't the belief that would get me anywhere. I actually had to believe that if I could make contact with this intelligence, get beyond myself and give it a template, give it a plan, give it a design, show it exactly what I wanted. And then I could surrender this creation to them. And it knew how to do the healing much better than me. Let's see if I could influence it. So that was number one. Number two, I said, I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. That was the hard part. Because when you're in crisis, when you're in trauma, when you're like in a stress or survival, we always focus on what we don't want to have happen. Living in a wheelchair, never being able to play sports again or do the things I love to do, never be able to do martial arts or yoga again, possibly being paralyzed. Like, what was that? And so I just started, okay, I got to put everything together that I know. And I was weighing what I knew against what I didn't know, because nobody was doing this. I was telling doctors in the 80s that they weren't going to have a surgery. And you're in trouble in your life when your best friends, and I had a lot of them surrounding me that were physicians, chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, physical therapists, surgeons, all my buddies that I hung out with. They were all around the table while I was laying there. I could see the discomfort in every one of their eyes. I could look around and they all said the same thing to me. We know you're going to make the right choice. And that really means I'm so happy I'm not you. I saw it in their eyes, and I watched them file out of the room and pat me on the shoulder, and they were so relieved to go back to their lives. My roommate from chiropractic college that I did yoga with every day, he stood there right with me the whole entire time, and we looked at those x-rays 1,000 times that night. 1,000 times. We decided that the best bet was to see if we could make contact and see if I could turn it around in some way. And I had 6.5 weeks of absolute hell. I was so bitter. I was so angry. I was so upset. I was so regretful that I went when I shouldn't have gone. I knew better. I was beating myself up. My life is ruined. My life is over. I'll never be able to train again. And when I started trying to focus on what I did want instead of what I didn't want, I would keep catching myself over and over again. I get frustrated. I get angry, and then it would get worse because I was driving myself further out of balance. And I'd start reconstructing every single vertebrae, just showing that intelligence that was present with me. I just had to be present with it, what I wanted. I'd get to the second vertebrae, and the next thing you know, I'd be thinking about living in a wheelchair. And I'd say, I got to start all over again. I'd start all over again, start reconstructing the vertebrae. I would show it exactly what I wanted. Get to the third or fourth one, then I'd think about, should I sell my home? Should I sell my practice? My friends were telling me to sell my practice. Sell your practice, super successful practice. But I wasn't there, and it was dwindling, but all my friends rallied, and they all, put time in to keep my practice going. I remember looking at them thinking, if I sell my practice, I must believe on some level I'm not going to walk again. I can't do it. I can't do that. I'm sorry, I can't sell my practice. So there was a lot of points where I started to venture away from the people in my life that loved me because they cared about me, but they thought it was over for me, And so So 6.5 weeks, I was in the dark night of the soul because there was no evidence around me. I read everything I could possibly read that would support my belief that I could do it. I read everything. I watched everything I could possibly watch. I spent every single day. It would take me 3 hours, sometimes longer, to go through the whole entire reconstruction process. And then when I did it, I would surrender it, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like and that bothered me. Remember, 6.5 weeks, I went through the whole thing. And one time I went through it from start to finish, and it took me like maybe 45, 50 minutes instead of an hour, instead of 3.5 hours or 4 hours. Under an hour for me was something different. And I just was getting better at paying attention. I was getting better at not going unconscious and defaulting. I was getting better at wiring that information, firing and wiring, until it got easier and easier. When it got easier and easier, then I had more time. And I started noticing that my body started to change. I noticed I got feeling in my toes. I started to notice I could move my foot. The severe pain in my lower back was diminishing, and that's when I knew. That's when I knew that what I was doing inside of me was producing an effect outside of me, and now my belief went up tenfold. Now I was doing it instead of resisting it, like, oh God, I got to do this again. I was like, do it. I want to do it with more intention, more passion. And then I had all this extra time, and I started thinking about, what if I could walk? I can't wait to take a shower, stand on my feet, oh my God, and I would live that. Why? Because I got excited that could actually happen. And I was so excited that I started anticipating the experience and feeling the emotion, and it was changing me more. I would just start seeing these future realities and feeling the emotions of them. And then they wanted to cast me in this full-on body cast. And they came and they fitted me for it. It was put this plaster all over me and custom fit this thing on me. And I was doing all kinds of things. They built an incline board for me to lay on. I wanted them to give me an opportunity to roll out there. And I reasoned that bones develop with calcium when there's a stress on them. And the periosteum, when there's a stress, produces a negative charge. And that negative charge draws a positive charge, calcium or magnesium. And I thought if they built an incline board and they took me out every day at 1 degree and I could lay back, and slowly they brought me up like this, so I could bear weight on my spine. Then I had them put me in a wetsuit that was 2 sizes too small for me, and there was a pool in the house. They put me in the pool, and I started hanging from one side, just the best of my ability. And then ultimately I was able to hang vertically. Then I just kept developing, this whole entire thing. And then, I don't know, maybe at 10 weeks, somewhere in the middle there, I woke up one morning and I was like, I'm going to get up. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk out of here. And I think there's something about knowingness. When you know something, I just knew. And so the buddy I stayed at his house was the guy who I worked for the first 3 months that took his practice and doubled it. And I had my own practice, and he was still a friend of mine. And him and his wife they took care of me in that house. They loved on me, and I got to know their babies really well. And I walked into his room. When he was sound asleep, I tapped him on the head. He jumped out of bed. He freaked out. I said, I'm going home today. He said, what about the brace? I said, I don't know. So they put the brace on me. I wore it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, forget this, And then I just kind of walked back into my life. But the thing was that I was a different person. I was not the same guy as I was before the accident. I wasn't victimized by it any longer. I was super thankful for what I had learned and what happened to me. And everything that I did in my life up until that point, I used. I used it on some level to change my experience of it. And my life changed dramatically. And I started thinking about, how could this happen? How could this possibly happen? Which led to me selling everything in San Diego. I wasn't the same guy. What was I going to complain about? There was nothing for me to complain. I hit a bad shot on the golf course. My friends would throw their clubs. I'd laugh. I'd be like, God, life is amazing. And so then that was it for me. And then I walked back into my life. I changed my clinic. We tripled our numbers. We just went off the hook. And then I sold my practice. And I left it all. And I moved to the Northwest, and I wanted to raise my kids. in the country. I wanted them to drink water out of the ground. I wanted them to have their own gardens. I wanted them to be along a river. I wanted them to know how to saddle a horse. I wanted them to know the difference between Swiss chard and kale. I wanted them to be into nature and to be connected to it. And I just took a different route. And then I started studying spontaneous remissions. And that's kind of how I got into it. I wanted to see if other people, in some measure, in some shape, some form, had something similar to me.
Dr. Joe, in your wonderful book, Becoming Supernatural, which I read cover to cover, you write, magic begins to happen in your life because you're no longer creating from duality or separation. I talk to students all the time who tell me that they are constantly overwhelmed by anxiety. It's not that they want to feel that way. Who does? Mm-hmm. But they can't stop. It's like 24/7. One of the mantras that you love to repeat over and over again that our audience will be hearing this week here in Marco Island is that where you place your attention is where you place your energy. What tangible actions can that 21-year-old, can our studio audience, can our viewers and listeners at home take right now, right this minute, to stop those anxious thoughts, to rewire their brains so that they can attract the abundance that they want and deserve?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, and it may take a few moments for me to answer it. Well, anxiety is readiness. And when we anticipate something that could happen in our life that is unpredictable, that we're uncertain about, that we have the perception that something can get worse, we can't control something, we can't predict something, we switch on that very system that gets us ready to do something, to deal with whatever it is that we're confronting. And the problem is that when we begin to forecast as a result of our emotional reaction to whatever it is in our life that's causing that, in a state of stress and in a state of survival, we always select the worst thing that could happen to us, because in survival, if you prepare for the worst, anything less that happens, there's better chances of surviving. So the innate mechanisms of the survival system causes us to move out of balance, and we imagine what would happen in the worst way. And out of the infinite potentials that exist as a possibility, we select that worst one, but that's not the end. We begin to literally emotionally embrace what it would feel like if it did happen. And the feeling that goes along with that outcome is fear. It's anxiety. It's worry. And the body's so objective in that moment that it's believing, it's actually living in that future reality in the present moment.
The one that sucks.
Yeah, it does not know the difference between the real life experience and the one that we're imagining. And so the body's actually living that reality. It becomes an issue if you do it enough times, that it's that thought and that feeling, the the image of that future and the emotion that's associated, that stimulus and response, that's conditioning the body to become the mind of that emotion. And now it becomes subconsciously programmed. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind, which is 5% of who we are by the middle of our lives. We've programmed it subconsciously. So then the moment we're living in vigilance, the moment we're living in fear, the body's getting an arousal. And that arousal becomes like a drug, and we overdose. And the body is using, the body is responding to the mind, and it's using those chemicals to wake up. It's using those chemicals to become more conscious, to become more aware of what? Something bad could happen in our lives. So now we're constantly anticipating the worst case scenario, and now the body is constantly programmed into that state. Conscious mind has no rule over what has been programmed subconsciously. In fact, the body now is the mind of anxiety. So the person is always sweeping the environment to look to see what in their life could actually go wrong. And they're living from that state constantly. In that state, we're living in lack, we're living in separation, and we're trying harder, we're working harder, we're fighting for outcomes, we're controlling outcomes because we're doing everything we can to stop the worst thing that could happen in our lives. Now, it becomes an addiction. An addiction is something that you think you can't stop, or an addiction is knowing something isn't good for you and doing it anyway. And so the person now starts to use the problems, the challenges, the adversity, the conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the difficult circumstances. They need the bad job. They need the poor relationship just to continuously feel that feeling, to torment the body, to constantly live out of balance. Now, if you keep doing that for an extended period of time, your brain gets very disorderly, gets very modulated, very compartmentalized, very divided. You keep doing that, and your body's physiology stays out of balance. And that imbalance becomes the new balance, and now the person's headed for some type of breakdown in one of the systems in their body. In other words, the body can't tolerate living in emergency mode for all that time. It's going to run out of energy. It's not going to have order. And that autonomic dysregulation becomes a person's constant state of being. So now they do their best to try to make that feeling go away. But the problem is they have no understanding that they could actually change that without relying on something outside of them. And so the person uses the drug, they video game, they do something.
A lot of drinking.
A lot of drinking to regulate that feeling, because that's the best way to take away that lack or that separation, or sedate the body enough where they can feel free. The problem is when you feel the anxiety, the brain automatically looks for the solution from last time. And so then the person becomes dependent on their outer world to change their inner world. And this is where, in time, people need to do more and more of the gambling, the video gaming, the shopping to try to make that feeling go away, or whatever it is that they do. Nothing wrong with that. But sooner or later, the person has to really look to see if they can change. So the anxiety then, in a state of readiness, causes the brain and body to stay on an idle, on a higher idle on a regular basis. Now, some people use that anxiety, a healthy form of it, to do something, to complete something, to take away the anxiety. There's nothing wrong with that. You're taking a test, you got an exam, you're a little vigilant, you're a little nervous. That's kind of a good amount of anxiety that's telling you you're ready, you better use this energy and do something with it, like study, like prepare, like learn. And the more you study, the more you prepare, the more you learn, you notice that those thresholds start to go down and you're taking care of it in some way. You go to the test unprepared, you get over anxious, or you remember the last time you failed, you can't concentrate now because you can't focus on learning when you're living in survival. It's not a time to learn. It's time to run, fight, and hide. And so this becomes very classic in young people that are living in the college setting or trying to create a profession for themselves or a future for themselves. I think one of the biggest challenges for youth really is that there are jobs that haven't even been created. At the pace in which technology and the world is going, if you don't know about that job because it doesn't exist yet, but it'll exist in a year, how could you ever know what you could be possibly doing, right? And so this is an amazing time for young people because there's so much uncertainty. And uncertainty, that causes us to live in fear because we can't predict. And when you can't predict an outcome, you're in the unknown. And that means you can't rely on anybody. You got to rely on yourself. And so the student loans, buying a home, which has become almost impossible for young people, finding and scoring the right job and working for a company that's thriving or growing, you don't see a lot of that. So what do you have left to invest in? And that's yourself. And investing in yourself then is being an expert at whatever you do and making time to make different choices than what everybody else makes. And you got to start choosing yourself on a regular basis. And yes, it's natural and it's normal. And there's a lot of agreement to say you're going to live in your parents' basement. You're probably not going to get a job. You're probably going to drink a lot with your friends. You're probably going to experiment with drugs. You're probably going to get involved in technology and get lost in that social world. And it'll distract you from ever doing what your heart tells you that you want to do. That's natural. That's normal. You'll never pay your student loans back. You know that conversation. And more so in history now than ever in my years I've been on this planet have I ever seen the world in the state that it's in. But we're not looking for normal. We're not looking for natural. We're looking for supernatural. And the person who invests in themselves that says, I'm going to take a risk on me, and I'm going to take this student loan out, and I'm going to make a commitment to myself that I'm going to pay it off in a year. I have no idea how I'm going to do that, but all I know is I'm going to arrive at that outcome, and I'm going to change along the way to arrive there. That is my statement. And I promise you, you make that statement and you come out of your resting state, you'll make better choices in your life because you'll keep your word to yourself. You have to now because you're all in. You pushed all the chips in. Now, nobody is going to choose you. Nobody is going to choose you. You're going to choose yourself. And if you get a wild idea and you see what it is in your life that you want to become, then if you want that more than anything else and you're passionate about it and it gets you up in the morning, you'll arrive there. But just remember, you're going to have to change a lot to get there. And that's what school and learning is about. You should be uncomfortable in school because you're weighing what you know against what you don't know. And arriving at that future, man, every single day means if you go all in, then you'll make the right choices for yourself on a regular basis because nobody else is going to do that for you when you see that future and no one else can see it. I've done it enough times in my life where people look at me like I'm crazy. And to them, I am because I'm unpredictable. And yet, you choose yourself every day, you get good at it. And you got to change the way you think. You got to change your beliefs. You got to change how you act. You can't make the same choices if you're going to arrive at that future. And you're going to be uncomfortable. So you got to decide, am I going to just choose myself and still be cool and still be fun, but I'm going to have time for me and take time away from my friends to invest in myself? I got to feel the emotions of my future. That's going to be the serum. That's going to be the energy. That's going to be the fuel that's going to get me there. I can believe in that future when I feel it. So to answer your first question, nobody's going to do that for you. That when you feel the feelings of your future, I swear to you, you'll no longer be in lack or separation. Because you're only in lack and separation when you feel some familiar emotion and you're wondering why it hasn't happened. If you're feeling the feeling of it, it means that it feels like your body's believing it's already happened and you'll never look for it. Stay in that feeling and you'll behave differently. Stay in that feeling and you'll make different choices. Stay in that feeling and you'll have different experiences. Stay in that feeling and you'll think differently than everybody else. Yeah, and will there be rough moments and will you make mistakes? Absolutely. But then you got to make a choice. Do I still believe in it or not? And so then it's natural and normal to have the agreement in social consciousness that you're never going to pay your loans back, you're never going to get a job. Yeah, that's natural and normal, but we're looking for something else. To commit and have that intention. I was crazy as a kid. I was telling somebody the other day maybe it was you. I had 33 things that I read 3 times a day. 3 times. I did it every single day. These 33 things were things of my future that I wanted. And I would cross them off. My friends would laugh at me. I'd read them in the backseat of the car out loud. I didn't care. That was where I wanted my mind. I had no idea how my subconscious mind was going to get me there. That was just me. And as I crossed them off my list, I started believing more that I was the creator of my life. And then unknown and unusual opportunities started to show up to cause me to believe that this is actually working. How long did it take? I don't care. All I know is that I paid all my loans back in a very short amount of time because that's what I wanted to do. I had no idea how it was going to happen, but the doors opened as a result of it. I like that. Caused me to want to do more of that. And so you got to change to arrive at that outcome. And I'm certain the world would give people a lot of agreement to stay in limitation. And yet the cream always rises to the top when you choose yourself. Always when you take the high road, when you believe and you never stop, and you keep one foot in that magical world and one foot in your real world, and you navigate between the two, you arrive at a whole different place. It's just that there's not a lot of agreement in the world for young people to believe in themselves and to believe in a new world.
In your other fabulous book that I've read, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is pretty much what he's talking about here, you write that psychologists tell us that by the time we're in our mid-30s, our identity or personality will be completely formed. This means that about 95% of who we are at that time in our mid-30s is a series of subconscious programs. We're an autopilot. They become automatic. What does this mean for our young audience, for our young viewers and listeners who aren't 35 yet, who are still in their 20s? How can they become more aware, more conscious of that subconscious programming? You've begun to map some of that out and rewrite the code. We may have some computer programmers in the audience, some engineers, and get in the driver's seat of their lives.
I don't really think it's that hard. I think there's an advantage to being young. You have more plasticity, less rigid, hardwired connections, nerve cells that fire together, wire together. You keep doing the same things over and over again, they become more automatic, more habituated, more easy. You keep thinking the same thought over and over again, it becomes a belief. And that's just a belief, is what you keep thinking over and over again until you hardwire it and it's subconscious. So then how do you feel on a regular basis? Are you fatigued? Are you resigned? Are you hopeless? Are you powerless? I mean, you got to look at that. You got to look at that, and if that motion that's tied to that thought is the body conditioned into the past, you just less baggage, a little more freedom, a little bit more plasticity, a little bit more loosening of the connections. You're not finite in your identity, and the frontal lobe doesn't finish developing until you're 25 years old. And I used to tell my kids all the time, one of them's still in his 20s. You got to learn as much as you can in your 20s. Never stop learning in your 20s. Learn and experience as much as you can, Get it all in there. Learn it, not just to learn the content, but to learn a way of thinking, to learn a sequential way of processing information. Learn as much as you can in your 20s. Make as much synaptic connections as you possibly can. Challenge yourself to remember it, store it in there, and now you are equipped. You're giving your brain the equipment, the raw materials for you to dream in ways that you could never dream if you didn't know it. And that's a greater level of consciousness. So, not hardwired to be a certain way for the rest of your lives. And in your 20s, my goodness, what a great opportunity to learn really good habits. What a great opportunity for you to believe in things that other people don't believe in. That's why I love our youth community. I want you here because I want you growing up in a community where people stand on the stage and heal themselves from all kinds of health conditions. I want that to be normal to you. I want you to be in that level of consciousness, and consciousness is awareness. And awareness is paying attention, and paying attention is noticing. And when you see someone stand on the stage that healed themselves, you'll start to think that that's normal, and that will be your belief. To be able to demonstrate that in your life And that gives people permission on some really intimate level to do the same. So in your 20s, get it wired in there, experience as much as you can, start walking as the mystic, start walking as abundance, start walking as success. Rehearse how you're going to be in your life on a regular basis. Step into that. In your 20s, that's the time. I was crazy in my 20s. I did everything.
Like what?
Well, remember, I'm weird, right? So I was in undergraduate school, and I was taking 21 and a half credits a semester. I was crazy. And I was taking all the sciences and pre-med, and I was running through this lecture hall, and I saw on the billboard like a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and it had all those cut things at the bottom where you can tear it off, and it said "Learn while you sleep," and I was like, I'm going to need that. And it just turned out that it was about hypnosis and self-hypnosis. At the same exact time, I had 3 roommates, and they were all sleep talkers and sleepwalkers. I mean, these 3 guys would argue with each other, sound asleep. I was mystified by these guys. And they would make fun of each other and get up, and one would leave the room and they'd argue. And I'd be like, Dwight, did you remember anything? No, I don't remember. They just didn't remember anything. And so I started looking into this in between my 21 and a half credits. I started thinking, oh my God, I started reading books on hypnosis really late at night, and I started hypnotizing these guys. Because they were deep state somnambulists, and I started really getting into hypnosis. And I was taking martial arts at the time in my spare time, and I was going to as many yoga classes as I could, but just because I couldn't do that really well, and I was athletic, but that was something different. And so all these things started happening, and then I just wanted to go to school. I wanted to go to school and not ever have to take a note. That's why I wanted to learn self-hypnosis, so I could learn everything while I was in the class, and then if I could just, at the end of the class, review the entire class in my mind, hypnotize myself to learn it, then I would have to study less and I had more time to do the things I wanted to do, and I could read a reference and go in and take the test, and I got better at it. I just got better at it. By the time I got to graduate school, I never took a note in school. And that's because I wanted to pay attention, and every time there was a pause in the class, I'd stop and rewind the whole entire lecture. And if I couldn't remember something, I'd ask the person next to me, or I would look it up right away so that I could remember that I forgot it and learn from my mistake. So I got, over time, I got better and better at it in my life. And so then I was driving down to Atlanta to go to graduate school, and I read Autobiography of a Yogi, just because the guy I was with said, you should read this, dude. And so I read the whole thing on the drive, and it's a fat book. And I didn't know much about people having power over their body and power over their environment, and it just kind of opened my mind up. Wow, this is not how I was raised in traditional religion, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I couldn't stop studying it, and then so I had this whole time in my 20s where I was studying self-hypnosis. I went back to, I took my student loan that I took, and instead of paying for my school, although I paid for it, I took a risk. I went to school and I learned hypnosis. I put over 500 hours of study in on the weekends and the evenings to learn to become a clinical hypnotherapist. And then I practiced in a holistic healing center in my 20s, and that's how I made money additional money to go to school and to pay for myself and make the money back that I had invested. And so after I read Autobiography of a Yogi, I couldn't just sit back and not do something about it. So my roommate and I would wake up every morning at 3:55 every morning and be out on the floor, and we'd do 3 hours of yoga from 4 in the morning till 7 in the morning. We never missed a day. We were crazy. And during that time, I learned more about the body than the anatomy classes that I was taking. And then I started having some really unusual experiences that changed me. And so I wasn't in my 20s. I didn't really, that period, when I was in undergraduate school, yeah, I partied, I went with my buddies, it was fun. But I also studied a lot. But when I left and went to graduate school, it never occurred to me to go out and party. It just didn't occur to me that I just wasn't that person. I was learning. I was really interested in everything I was learning. I was excited about it. I was doing a lot of yoga. I got my martial arts. I would go to martial arts class 4, sometimes 5 days a week in the late evenings, starting at 8 o'clock. And that was just something that was a way for me to get away from learning and doing something that it was another way for me to
stretch
find
yourself.
And so I learned. I got some good habits going in terms of discipline. And there was nobody that I knew of that was doing what we were doing, but it was just because we were in search of information and was it really possible? And so somehow it all integrated in my 20s, and I was doing triathlons at the time, and just my life changed in really profound ways because I wasn't making the common choices I think that a lot of people were making at that time. So my 20s, I think I developed a lot of really good habits because I was really curious if it was the truth more than anything else.
I just feel tired hearing that, don't you? I feel like I slacked off my entire life, Dr. Joe.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. I was like going out on a Friday night, and I just,
It wasn't like.
I have so much respect. I really do.
But I wasn't like, I'm not going to go out and I really want to go out. I did enough of that in college, and I was really curious about everything that I was learning and trying to figure it out, trying to figure it all out. I was always asking questions and trusted my truth meter. Was that not the truth? It doesn't sound right to me. And so in my 20s, I was in a very, very sincere level of curiosity. And I just grew up with parents that just always said to me, if anybody else can do it, you could do it. So there was 908 yoga postures. I thought, I'm going to get all 908 down. I'm just going to figure out how to do all of these. And we were just constantly reading, constantly learning. It was just kind of a crazy journey.
And you did it. You got all 908?
Yeah, just about.
What have you missed?
Well, there were a few ones where you bend your knee away that I just don't think my knee could go. So
okay,
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I had the pleasure of attending the Nashville week-long advanced retreat earlier this year. Got to sit through several lectures that were given, and also many, many meditations. I was trying to manifest 2 things that week. And this is a true story. How many lectures do you give during a typical week long?
I don't know. Let me do some quick math here.
I think they're like 30. It's 3 times 7, 21 plus.
About 21.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. So there are a lot. There were several dozen. The 2 things I was trying to manifest were meeting my soulmate and interviewing Dr. Joe. Interviewing Dr. Joe, and there's another part, writing a best-selling book, and maybe even partnering with him on a project, but he doesn't know that part yet. So on day 7, the 21st lecture, I'm running late, and there are 2,000 people in this huge auditorium. And like all of you are wearing lanyards, I had my red lanyard on, and I'm looking for a seat quickly because he's about to take the stage. And I find a seat like in the middle, in the red section, and I scoot in a couple of seats, and I'm sitting next to this guy wearing a cowboy hat. And the way that Dr. Joe lectures is he will say whatever it is he's saying, and then he turns to the audience and he says, now turn to the person next to you and explain what I just said. So I'm turning to the guy next to me. We're back and forth, and probably the fourth or fifth time, I said, so is this your first retreat? And he goes, oh God, no. He said, I've been coming to these since 2010, 2011. It was Tim Shields. Tim Shields.
In a cowboy hat? Tim Shields in a cowboy hat? Okay.
He was one of the editors on Dr. Joe's New York Times bestselling book, Becoming Supernatural. Worked for Dr. Joe for about 6 years. And he is the one who put me in touch with Dr. Joe's executive assistant. Like a thief in the night. This is what Dr. Joe will say to you a few times over the course of the next week. So like a thief in the night, I became a believer. Holy cow. I'm a newbie at all of this, and I clearly...
You're doing very well, I would say.
Thank you.
It's not that hard, actually, when you believe in yourself.
So I got part 1, right? Or part 2 of my 2-part. And I think part of it that really helps is when you're with hundreds of other people and your heart is open, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a blast. You're getting up. Doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m, you're dancing in front of the stage with great music, and Dr. Joe is dancing along with you, and opening my heart and feeling the feelings and believing was not such a challenge to me. The challenge is when you go back home, maybe to my apartment is nice, but some people may not like their home. Some people may not like the people they're living with. And you're imagining your future and you're trying to manifest it. But the reality is maybe not as great. How can you be a master manifester like you?
Well, I don't know if I'm a master manifester, but I will answer the question for you. To change is to think, act, and feel differently in the same environmental condition, and to do it enough times that that environment begins to change because you're changing. And nothing changes in your life until you change. I think so many people walk in to do the meditation when they leave this place, and there is an energy, there is the spirit of change and transformation present. It's very infectious. Our research shows people change people. And when you're kind, other people are kind. When you love, other people love. When you're caring, other people care. It's an emergent consciousness in so many ways. And so to me, that's the feeling you should strive for. That feeling right there is the feeling you have to get up when you finish your meditation. You gotta get up feeling that same feeling. And you got to remember that feeling enough times that you can bring it up on your own, because if you can't, you won't be able to bring it up on your own. And nobody's going to give you that feeling in the end but you. So I don't care if it takes an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours for us to get there. I just know that when I do get there, I'm so happy that I do. And if it takes that long, I swear to you, when it's the hardest, it matters the most. So the excuse that we can give on a regular basis is to shrink back into mediocrity and to say, I need the event to do this. Well, that's just another thing that we are unconsciously agreeing to and believing, that it's better to do it in a community than to do it on my own. Well, if you truly believe in the quantum model, by you showing up, there is a collective consciousness that you can tap into every day. Every day. You don't have to be in the presence to move into that momentum. And so, God, taking a little time for ourselves every single day is such a service to the world. Being alone without your device or without any stimulation, and really getting ready to do your meditation. I would never sit down and do my meditation until I was very clear in my think box how I was going to do it, what I wasn't going to do, who I wasn't going to think about, the things I know I'm going to get to anyway. What am I going to do if this thing comes up? How am I going to move through this? I got 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 decisions today. I got too much going on, all of that stuff. That's when you immerse yourself back in the world. That's when you leave the monastery and return back. And you got to start reminding yourself the thoughts you're not going to think. And you got to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you don't go unconscious of them and believe them. You got to become super aware of how you're speaking, how you're acting, what you're saying. If you're complaining, if you're judging, like that's not who you truly are. You gotta think, okay, what emotions bring me down to that place where I seamlessly go unconscious and we default back to that old personality. That's the same. That feeling is the past, and I'm going to believe I'm in the past, and I'm going to behave like I am, and I'm going to think like I am, and I will be in my past. Okay, how many times am I going to do that till I stop doing that? This is the work. And then how do I want to think? How do I want to program my mind? How am I going to create a new belief? Let me put my intention and my attention behind it and repeat it enough times until I remember to think this way. It's not that hard. What choices am I going to make that I know that I could possibly not want to make? Let me just remind myself of the choice I'm going to make, the thing I'm going to do. Let me review it enough times so I remember to do it. Even though if I don't want to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. Let me rehearse it. Rehearsing is priming the brain for the action. It's changing the brain to look like you already did it. How am I going to feel? When I get up from this meditation, how much love for my future could I be in? And let me remember this feeling. If I have to remember it 1,000 times, I'm going to keep bringing it up, so I can bring it up on my own. That's the work. And so making time for our precious selves, to love ourselves enough, to disconnect from our life long enough to change our life, to disconnect so that we can reconnect. If people get up from their meditations and they believe less in their future than when they started, it's because they didn't overcome the feeling of themselves, the habit of themselves, the hardwired belief, perception, or attitude. Some people actually do this work and they believe more in their future when they get up in that state. And the people who fall from grace, I've done it enough times. If you're truly committed to that future and you defaulted back to the old personality, you got one of two choices. Stay there and find somebody else who's doing the same and use each other to reaffirm your addiction to victimization and call that normal. And that's a social agreement that we make. But the person who separates the sacred from the mundane says, in the light of all eternity, it's never going to be the right moment, especially when I feel this way. Let me take a break here and let me get back into the feeling of my future so I can believe it again. And when it's the hardest, it matters the most. And so the events are a preparation for people to practice becoming somebody else, so that when we turn back into their lives, they are somebody else, that they literally have become somebody else, and they catch themselves from going unconscious. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. So I just want to be very clear that it's not easy getting 2,000 people to that state of mind and body. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of times to overcome themselves. It's a lot of opportunities to practice. And we want to give people the tools so that they have within their reach something to do when they return back into their lives. And so it's not as hard as we think it is if we sit down and do it with the same passion and the same intent on our own. And that's a great service, not only for the collective of the group, but for everybody in your life. For everybody in your life. You're just different than everybody else. So it's easy to excuse that and say, oh, well, it's better at the events. But I can tell you, you really get serious about doing it, just like you get serious about anything that you do in your life with the same passion. You sit down like that, you'll really enjoy it. You'll really, really enjoy it. And I don't know, some guy stopped me in the gym today, young guy, and he's like, hey, can I tell you a story? What am I going to say? No? Of course, tell me the story. Tell me about it. His life changed and his health changed and all these things changed. And I said to him, so you do the work now because you want to? He goes, oh, yeah. Like I love doing it. Like I'm not going to stop doing it. Are you kidding me? I'm not forcing him into being a creator. He's seeing the effects in his life, the inspiration of the unknown, the synchronicity, the opportunity. He said, I can't even tell you how many synchronicities I have. There's not enough time. I said, oh, so then this is meaningful. Oh yeah, I will never miss a day. And the world needs meaning. It just needs me. He has meaning behind when he does that. He is not of the belief that it doesn't work. That is not his belief any longer. His belief is, I'm going to keep doing this because I don't want it to stop. Then that's when it becomes exciting. So it was just mind. It was just mind over matter. And when I was laying in on those sleepless nights when I was convalescing after my injury, I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And here I am doing these interviews, and all of a sudden I realize I have to upgrade my model. So I go back to school, I start studying neuroscience again, I start studying meditation and some of the models of it and looking to see. I couldn't find the answers to what happened to me in conventional texts. I used to go to the University of Washington Library. This is when they had a card catalog still. And then I came back one day and there was no longer a card catalog. There was a computer called Akasha. And that had all the records, and I would start pulling up all this stuff and trying to figure it out. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the answers in any of the texts until I started looking at neuroplasticity and epigenetics and psychoneuroimmunology. This was a model that I could piece together, quantum physics even. You can't explain how a cut heals without quantum now. And so it changed my whole view. And so then when I saw other people doing it, then I just wanted to know what they did. And that's when I started figuring out they had to break the habit of being themselves and reinvent a new self. They had to overcome and become. They had to lose their mind and create a new one. They had to change on some level. And so then that led to me writing a book and then being in a documentary that went really big many years ago. And that just led me to this whole kind of crazy world where the philosophy after that movie, that documentary, started great conversations. But I was on enough panels to listen to what the questions were, and people really wanted to know just a few things. How do you do it? Which I thought was a great question. If to change your personality is to change your personal reality, why is it so hard to change? I thought that was a great question. And then they asked me, what do you do? And so that's when we started doing workshops. And this is a time in history now. It isn't just enough to know. That was a time then. This is a time in history to know how. So I started teaching events with the practical application, with knowledge and using all the different branches of science that point the finger at possibility, from quantum to epigenetics and everything in between. And we didn't see much changes in the first couple years. People felt better. They were, better. And then the brush fire started. And I don't know if I started saying it better or the consciousness of the collective was better, but it just started happening. And that's when we started measuring, because we started seeing those changes. And so that led me to 4 books. That led me to the scientific inquiry. That led me to just asking bigger questions about what's possible. And I'm still happy to say that I'm learning.
Mm.
So, I mean, if I didn't have that accident, I wouldn't be sitting here. What if the worst thing that happens to you in your life is the best thing that happens to you in your life? And I was a pretty bitter person. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody's pity. I didn't want anybody tell me what they thought was going to happen to me. It was a chilling moment, that dark night of the soul, when you realize that nobody has the answers to your life but you. This is where you have to believe in yourself. And it's not a linear journey. It's not a linear journey where you go from point A to point B. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of everything when you're left with you. And I think, though, that we are all faced with great opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. And we have to meet the challenges in our life constantly from a greater level of mind. And so what has emerged out of all of this is just a community of people that believe in possibility. They're not believing in the known. Nothing new is in the known. They're believing in the unknown, and they're proving to themselves that it actually works. And I want everybody to experiment with it, because I think that everybody is included. And so the outcomes that we are creating right now is a testament to the understanding that people are more informed about possibility to this day. And I'm so happy. I never really tell the story. I ask in most podcasts to never really talk about my injury, because I never want it to be about me. I really don't. I mean, I want it to be about our community. There's better stories than that to me. There are people that are healing from stage 4 cancer. There's blind people seeing. There's deaf people hearing. Stage 4 cancer that spread to the bones, to the lungs, to the liver. People with muscular dystrophy, ALS, spinal cord injuries, myasthenia gravis, all kinds of chronic health conditions. People growing thyroids back. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that. And so I never want it to be about me. I want it to be about our community. I want it to be about us, in its collective networks of observers with brain and heart coherence that really begin to affect reality. And we have data to prove that as well. So once you see the person on the stage, that's the 4-minute mile that's telling the story of their own personal change and transformation. They've broken through some level of consciousness or unconsciousness. They're showing the collective that it's no longer theory. It's no longer philosophy. They're the example of truth right in front of you. And I love that they come in all sizes, all shapes, all colors, all ages, all professions. And those people do the work. They do the meditations, not to heal. They do the meditations to change. And they understand that when they change, they heal. And so the process of change then, becoming so conscious of your unconscious self, to know thyself that you wouldn't go unconscious. If you can cross that river of change, there will be new opportunities. There will be new synchronicities, new possibilities that begin to show up in your life because you held on to that intention. Independent of what people think of you, will always be considered foolhardy and insane because they don't believe it. And they will consider you a fool. They will consider you a heretic, a charlatan, until you pull it off. And once you pull it off, you're a mystic, you're a saint, you're a genius. And daring to be original in this time is so important to understand that the world can be sweeping and moving in one way. And there is a, never in my life have I seen the world as it is today. And yet the problems in this world that were created from a certain level of consciousness, but must be resolved from a greater level of consciousness, and that's our future, our youth. That you have to be able to stand up for truth and face off with adversity and be able to be relaxed in your heart and awaken your brain and not compromise in any way, to not give up on that future. I promise you there are more of you. And I believe that if you change enough people, you can change the world. And that's when you get out in the world with your eyes open and you show the world what love does. You show them what greatness is. You show them what a new invention is that can change the course of the world. And I just want it to be equally about you. I never want this work to be about me. I had my own journey. I'm still on my own journey in so many wonderful ways.
This is why I say none of us has a crystal ball. Believe in yourselves and look for the magic. I want to thank our live audience here in Marco Island.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
They're wonderful. I want to thank our viewers and listeners at home. And Dr. Joe, so much gratitude.
Oh, thank you.
So much gratitude. I want to wish you, everyone, many, many more magical moments to come.
Me too.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of This Magic Life. Our mission is to inspire you to stop fearing your future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await you. Make sure to subscribe to This Magic Life on YouTube so you don't miss any new episodes. And for on-the-go listening, give us a follow wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We absolutely love to get feedback from the This Magic Life community, so make sure to drop us a comment on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple. And you can always find me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel, aka the Career Magic Maker. I can't wait to see you soon.